each one, they'd finally be able to, oh, this is the one right here because he's thinking these thoughts, or how would they actually make the initial identification?
Well, since you're all exhibiting a different EEG pattern, usually, especially if you're having organized stalking, then you have some boots on the ground that know who you are already. So, I mean, basically, you were singled out by sight, and then your EEG was remotely sensed and placed in the system. And once it's read, then it's automatic. That part of it, the tracking is automatic. There's nobody sitting with a mouse actually tracking you as you go. That's all done automatically.
Well, what's really interesting about this is when it began, it started out as a ringing in the ears, which basically doesn't. It's a frequency that doesn't sound like it's in the ears, but it's like kind of between the ears. And I noticed immediately that. I mean, it caused me to have extreme fear, a fear response. That's the other aspect to this that I've noticed is there's this almost kind of manipulation of the emotional state that it can do. But what I did was just by being kind of like an observer, I noticed that in different parts of the city it was more intense. It was also affected by getting underneath a multi-layer space blanket, which I've used to kind of protect myself at times when it seems really bad, which helps. But I think I need to do more as far as the shielding goes. But the point being that I noticed that that it's affected by location and by different circumstances, and that it seems to have the capability. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. I noticed initially that when I would move my body from one location to another, like walk real fast to a different location, that there would be the sound would go away or it would dissipate slightly, and then I could hear the frequency increase in volume again, like the tracking had just found me again. It's really bizarre.
No, so that is because some of the modalities they have to aim at you, and some of them actually track along with you automatically. And especially with the directed energy weapons, you can move out of their way. That is somebody that's looking at a FLIR image or an X-ray image of you on a screen, and they're attacking you anatomically. And most of the time, you can move out of the direction of that attack. And it takes a while, especially if it's a microwave. Once it's been on you a while before it starts to hurt. When you move, the pain will go away. And logical thinking, you would think, well, then if I move, then it should transfer the pain to another side, whatever it's hitting when I move. But it still will take time to actually build up enough thermal reaction in the skin or wherever they're attacking you to hit. Now, the other part of it, the ELF wave generated audio harassment, that is the one that seems like it's going wherever you go and tracking you, because that is put down in a broad spectrum. And that just needs something to vibrate around you to carry the sound. Now, that's not voice to skull. You're not hearing that in your head. You're hearing that, what sounds like whispers around you, in running water, in anything that vibrates. So some of the modalities are tracking automatically, and some of them have to be moved by hand along to you. So that's why you're seeing that. I know some of the victims I've talked to who just are totally convinced that they're chipped and it's being done by a neighbor with a handheld weapon. Well, usually they become convinced how it is satellite once they take a big trip. When they get on a plane, they fly to Florida, from Wisconsin to Florida, and they're still being attacked just as much on the plane, and they're still being attacked just as much in another state. Well, then they come around.
That was going to be my next question. Is it possible to move away and have this stop? Because that's obviously one of the big solutions that I've considered, even though it creates a huge disruption in my life. But
you'll move away from the stalking, but you won't move away from the electronic attack if they choose to follow you wherever you end up.
Well, I mean, thank you very much, Rob, for calling in. I do want to ask a question here.
Sure. Thank you for your time,
Dr. Paul. I was wondering, because it occurs to me that one of the things that goes on with plants, I don't know if you've done any experimentation in this area, but healers know that you can go to a forest, a place where there's greenery, after you have been involved in, electronics and trying to heal an individual or get rid of negative energy. And basically, the plants will take and dissipate that energy. And so it occurs to me that it's possible to sort of help people that are going through some of this to get into a meditative state, and to do so in a place where there's a lot of greenery and a lot of nature, away from sort of city where there's a lot of electronics and so on, that it can be helpful to be around plants.
Well, Carrie, I mean, you're a genius, because that is one of the things that we recommend to people, is to get out anywhere, really. And you're right, being around heavy vegetation does seem to, if anything, if it's not absorbing some of it, it's getting your mind off of it. And that's really one of the best modes of defense, is just to get your mind off of it. If what they want you to do is lose your job and sit at home in your bedroom and just listen to them and just be attacked, if you actually get out and live your life and try to ignore it, eventually you will succeed and learn how to do that. That's one of the things we always recommend to people. Don't sit at home and just sit there listening to them 24 hours a day and being attacked. Most of the victims over time will notice, if they're focused on a conversation with someone else, or focused on doing something, performing some type of a task, they'll notice that they're ignoring the voices and they're ignoring the attack. It's the more deprivation you have, the easier it is for them to victimize you.
Absolutely. And I would say that it is happening also. There's a different way of looking at this, which is that the veil between individuals is thinning, and this is maybe a little esoteric, but in a movement into fourth dimension, where we are becoming a more telepathic society as a whole. In other words, people are starting to open up to their other senses beyond the normal five. And what happens there is that basically the boundaries between people are thinning and breaking down. And what has to happen is that people have to develop these strengths. And unfortunately, the technology is actually a challenge, if you can look at it like that, for the people that are under attack and are, feeling that sort of pervasive in pervading their lives, that basically they can develop these strengths, these muscles that normally they wouldn't be developing, that this is actually an opportunity. It's just a different way of looking at it.
That's a good way to look at it, because that is one of the things we're working on, is using the mind to combat it. I mean, as like Rob was talking about, he's using shielding methods, and a lot of people are using mylar or copper mesh, and it just doesn't seem to work that well. It will lessen some of it. Some of the modalities it will shield, some of them they won't. The ELF wave broadcasting, a lead line of room won't shield, and nothing shields from ELF. And most of the remote neural monitoring is done on an ELF wave basis. And what we found is that whenever we figured this out from the remote reading experiments in the 60s and 70s, in people with the innate ability to remote read or project thought, that's the thought is, and the Russians were the first to click on this, is that it's being done through ELF wave transmission from the brain. Now, Puthoff and Targ, in their studies, they kind of poo-pooed the ELF wave hypothesis. The Russians say it's completely ELF wave generated, that the way a remote reader or a remote influencer can influence another person is done by ELF waves being generated from the mind. Well, whenever you open up an ELF wave channel, be it whether it's synthetic from a satellite down to a human being or from human to human, that's a two-way communication. Data transfer can go both directions. By controlling your thought, learning how to project your thought, you can actually put voices right back into the heads of your perpetrators using the same ELF wave channel that they've artificially created to you via satellite.
And that's actually and that's really excellent, and I'm glad you're bringing that up. There is the basically, well, I think of it as an occult technique, but it is a remote viewing and influencing technique as well.